Are you ready?
Got it.
Yes, Mother dears.
Mommy dears.
Corella.
Mommy dears.
Okay, not just me, right? Okay.
Okay, good afternoon. I would like to call this meeting of the Oldham County Board of Education to order. It's October 26, 2020. We are at the Arvin Education Center. First item of business is to approve an agenda. Superintendent, do you have any corrections or additions?
There's just one supplemental on consent items, enclosure D at the very bottom, and there was a piece of paper on your desk that is a Kentucky Educational Technology System contract that came in after we had already submitted the agenda.
Yes, sir. All right, with that addition, may I have a motion to approve the agenda, please? Motion made by Ms. Hunley and seconded by Mr. Dodson. All those in favor? And that is 5-0. Ms. Peters, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, ma'am? I'll get you started.
You get me started. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You did good.
Thank you, Ms. Peters. All right, Superintendent, we are ready for our instructional session, sir.
So I think you will find this instructional session to be very informative. This is something that you've never seen before because we've never had a global pandemic in anybody's lifetimes. But every day at 3 o'clock, we meet and we talk about the COVID data and what's going on in our school system, and then we make sure we report that to our general public as well as reporting to the state. So I've asked Eric Davis, Lisa Burgess, and Michael Williams to talk about the COVID-19 processes and procedures that we go through every single day.
Yes, thank you. Are we going to begin with Mr. Davis?
Ma'am.
Thank
I
you.
think we're all going to come up. And can you guys hear me okay if I leave this on so we don't have to?
Yes, but I don't know how it transmits, Eric. That would be a question for Miss Lori.
Oh,
That's going to be the first problem. You have to.
the green light is on.
Are you paired?
See, it's got less than a quarter of a battery.
Thank you. You could go ahead and begin
Okay.
with Vice Chairman Woosley's mic.
Alrighty.
Mr. Davis. We are comfortable with you taking your mask off at that distance, so
Okay.
you do what you're comfortable
Great.
with.
All right. So as Mr. Schultz said, this is new, obviously, because this is the first global pandemic we've ever dealt with. So the Student Services Department is kind of morphed into Student Services and COVID. And the three of us head this team up. But also, before I start, I just want to make sure that everybody understands, like, it is truly all hands on deck. From our office managers and administrators to teachers, but I want to especially thank our school nurses who are doing a bulk amount of this work at the school level, and without them implementing or inputting all the information, we would be without what we need to do. So I wanted to thank both them, but also you all for giving us those positions, because they've been very, very helpful, not just with students in the building, but also with COVID stuff going on. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
The first slide here you're going to see is I tried to break down a little bit about what our roles look like. So in addition to the things that we do in a normal school year, you will see how we have broken down kind of a divide and conquer type model. So Lisa, who we're all going to speak today, but Lisa, who is up front, she handles basically all the initial phone calls. So when something pops up, she takes that call from the school, from the parent, from the health department, and kind of gets the ball rolling on all of that. She also answers tons of phone calls from staff and students or parents on the appropriate steps to take. We also sent out something to all office managers and administrators on specific steps to take when you get information that you have a positive case. But her phone rings constantly all day long on, what should we do about this? What should we do about that? And she's been really, really good about coordinating that information with the health department. And that leads me into the next part there. She is the main liaison between our school system and the health department. We have a very, very close relationship with them. We talk to them every day, at least once or twice a day. And one of the big things we do that she will probably talk about later is we facilitate record sharing between the two entities and also facilitate conferences. So when we have a positive case at a school, we will have a conference call between the administrators, the nurse at the school, and then us so that we can make sure everybody's on the same page and we know exactly what steps to take. And Lisa will go through that in just a moment. My part is I do a lot of the record keeping. So I do, in addition to our 3 o'clock meetings that I facilitate each day with personnel and communications and Greg, we do that every day at 3, but I also update the daily website so that parents and community members can see active cases in the community or in our school community. I also update the daily state website that we have to report any cases of students or staff and also any quarantines of students and staff. So I do that every day before I leave, usually about 4:30. And so that all of our information is on the state website and so we don't get any mean phone calls. Mr. Williams, Michael handles all the things attendance and Infinite Campus, which is a huge deal. So when students go on quarantine or have a positive case, Michael will talk about this in a minute, but they have to be shifted in Infinite Campus to a different blended learning group so that their attendance can then become participation so that we are not hurt by students being out, but that they can still participate at home. And we can talk a little bit about that too. Michael is obviously has always been the district liaison between us and the state and Infinite Campus, so he has worked through all the codes and the attendance. That stuff is really challenging and really intricate, so I will let him explain that. He knows much more about it than I do. So I'm going to bring Lisa up, and I'm big on thank yous, and I also just want to publicly say Lisa has been incredible through this. She has totally shifted her role to take on an enormous thing where she is the point person for 13,000 student district with 1,000 staff members. She works a lot of hours at night, and so I just wanted to publicly thank her because while she's 1/3 of the wheel, she's really the main wheel. So I just want to thank her publicly and bring her up and she can explain our thought process.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
You're welcome. Let me do this real quick here, Lisa.
Welcome, Ms. Burgess.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you. I would also like to thank the schools and the nurses as well. They have been incredible in gathering data, seating charts, and that type of thing for when we do have a case, because we need to get these things in a timely manner to get families notified of anyone that needs to be quarantined. So they have played a big part, as well as the administrators, the principals, the office staff. They've all done a great job with streamlining everything to make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible. So I'm just going to go over the process and procedures when we get a positive case. The governor has obviously required parents and staff members to report any positive case to the school. So when that happens, these are the steps that we take. Now, I will say ahead of time that sometimes there are special circumstances, a little bit trickier cases, so I work hand in hand with the health department in getting these tricky situations taken care of. So first off, once a parent reports a positive case to the school, then the school will immediately notify me. So that's usually going to be the nurse. Now that school is in session, the nurse will notify me and let me know. And then I will begin to collaborate with the health department while Eric works with the principal in the notification process. I have a really close relationship, a couple contacts at the health department where we text each other, call each other, and it's kind of like a hotline. So we get in touch pretty quickly whenever we hear about a case. The school will send a notification of exposure letter to anyone impacted, if it's a staff member or student, at the school or on the bus, and they will notify the staff of a positive case within the building. So usually the principal will email the staff and just let them know, hey, we have a positive case, and then this notification letter will go out to any families that are impacted, meaning like in that classroom. All the students in the classroom will get a notification letter, and it basically is just saying, hey, just wanted to let you know we have a positive case, and you will be notified if you are going to be considered a high-risk contact. The health department will notify them directly. And then the school, they gather seating charts with the measurements for the classrooms, the bus, lunch, electives, recess, and so that's kind of a process that we've learned as we've gone along. So now we've got it down pretty well, where the schools have a seating chart with the students, because obviously every classroom has assigned seating, so we can gather those seating charts, and we've asked the schools to put the distance between the seats, so the health department knows exactly how far apart the students are seated. And then, for the most part, the schools have done an excellent job in making sure that the classrooms are spaced out, but there are some, obviously, where it's just not possible. So it's good to have those seating charts so we can determine that. And then the school will gather, they'll verify attendance of the students in those seating charts as well, because there obviously could be a student who was absent that day. And then all of this information is faxed over to the health department. Once we gather it, they send that to the health department, and then I always ask the nurses to send me a copy as well, because after that, I will facilitate a conference call with the health department, and the principal of that school and the nurse will get on a call. We'll look over all the seating charts, and we'll let the health department guide us in their thinking. Sometimes they have questions, and so this conference call has really helped, because they're able to ask questions, say, okay, well, is there a lot of movement in this classroom? Does the teacher walk around? Or, if it's something outside, they can ask questions as far as the contact with that student. So after that, then Eric, he will update the records to ensure the accurate reporting on the Oldham County Schools website and the state reporting website. Oh, I've got the clicker. Eric, sorry, I forgot you sent that. It's in my hand. So then once the health department determines the student staff that are considered close contact, the health department will send a list of those students to, it's kind of like our department as well as the nurse. It's kind of like a multiple email, encrypted email, so it's private email on that. And then those schools that are currently in school will pull them to the office, and the parents will be notified to come pick them up. And the health department will make a phone call to those families, notifying them that they've been considered a high-risk contact, and they will need to quarantine, and they will give the dates of how long the quarantine should last. We notify transportation of the students who are quarantined, so the bus drivers know when the students are allowed to come back and be picked up on the bus again. And then Michael will move all of the quarantine students into a different learning group, like Eric had just mentioned. And then Eric will update Mr. Schultz and personnel and the communication department at our 3 o'clock meeting as far as the numbers and any changes that have been made for that day. And then our department, we monitor each case daily and maintain records throughout the end of the quarantine. And that's about it. Any questions about that?
Questions, board members? Will somebody speak to us a little bit about these learning groups? Would that be in your wheelhouse, Michael's wheelhouse? Great job, Lisa. You are keeping a lot of balls in the air.
I do have a question real quick.
Right.
So Lisa, just to be clear, there has not been any huge outbreaks at any of our schools as a result of a kid or a staff member testing positive?
No, I will say, overall, it's been, I think it's been low. It's worked out really well with the kids coming back to school. Of all the quarantines that we have had no positive cases out of those quarantines. And I would say, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe all of our positive cases, with the exception of one, has been a adult in the household, either a parent, a guardian, has been the person who was positive first, and then the student resulted in a positive after that. We've only had one case where there wasn't a parent involvement in the house.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burgess.
Okay, so I want to talk to you a little bit about the difference in quarantines. So we have school-related and non-school-related. So the state website requires us to report any school-related quarantines, but not non-school-related quarantines. So just to kind of give you the difference with those, obviously the school-related quarantines come when a student or staff member has been positive at school, and therefore the health department has done contact tracing and determined that a certain number of students and or staff have to be quarantined due to that exposure at school. And as Lisa just told you, and then I'm going to show you the actual numbers here after Michael speaks, that we've had 154 quarantines due to school-related exposures, and 0 of those have resulted in positive cases. So while I'm just providing the facts to you, I think it is fair to say that the spread at school has not been prevalent. These cases are being brought in to our school, and those cases have not been spreading to other people from what we can tell so far based upon our data. The non-school related quarantines, we do not have to report to the state website, but I do keep record of those just so that we know which kids need to go into a different type of learning group that Michael's going to talk about. So for example, if this past week, if a parent became positive, their kid has to quarantine for 14 days. I do keep record of those internally so that we can discuss those and make sure that their learning needs are met while they are gone for 14 days. So those are the differences between those. There's obviously a much greater number of non-school related quarantines that I do keep track of, but we've had as of Friday before fall break, when this needed to be turned in for this board meeting, we had 154 quarantines that had come from the cases that we've had in the district. But again, 0 of those ended up turning out to be positive cases as well. So, and then I'm going to turn it over to Michael here, and then I will finish up once he is finished.
Mr. Davis,
Yes,
let
ma'am.
me, before you leave us, questions for Mr. Davis. Mr. Kehoe.
I do have a couple of questions, I guess, for all you guys. So does this committee oversee the athletics as well?
So if a case includes an athletic event, we do the exact same thing for this that we do for school, except for it would be like also including the coaches in that conversation. Athletic directors would be the big ones that help us with that because of the groups and the pods and all that. I know we've had some of those that have come up, and you can add to that if there's anything you want to.
I would just add that the athletics are going off of the KHSAA guidelines on that. I mean, it aligns pretty well, but they do have a couple of different guidelines that they go by, so we abide by their guidelines that they have in place.
Okay. I'm the biggest advocate of our sports program here. Of the 154 kids who have tested positive, how many of those are athletes?
Not tested.
Quarantines.
Quarantine, I'm
154
sorry.
quarantines.
Correction, not tested positive, Mr.
Yes,
Kehoe.
definitely.
It's not many.
I would,
I have the actual. I mean,
yeah, we have the extra, but it's
Very
a
little.
couple maybe.
Yeah, it's very, very few.
And to your point, Mr. Kehoe, even the summer, and Mr. Deves is a part of these meetings as well because he and Ms. Pitzenberger oversee the high school athletics. Even in the summer, we were not seeing a ton of cases coming from our athletes as well, and that's a tribute to the coaches and the procedures that they've set up, not only for their social distancing, their pods, but their cleaning and the procedures. And Mr. Deves and I have conversations every day, it seems like, about sports and red spots and coaching and all this other stuff. But they've done a really nice job managing those situations as well.
And I think I had a quick conversation with you. I'm just concerned that some of the interpretations of the KHSAA rules are being interpreted differently between the different high schools and the different sports. And where I've heard that some sports allow masks, some doesn't within our district. It's just the rules seem to vary a little bit differently. And I was just, had a little concern of that issue. We're selling tickets online, but we're still allowing the cash purchase to split the pot. There's just so many different variations that I wish we could kind of get on the same page. So in case we do have a breakout, but that seems like it's a very minor statistic there where fortunately, there's no breakouts within the sports programs.
And in terms of what, procedures and things like that, it is definitely more Mr. Deves and Ms. Pitzenberger, but, I'm sure that we can work through our athletic directors on those specific things too.
Perhaps you could share some follow-up
I'd be
information
happy
with
to do that.
Mr. Kehoe
Sure.
and the board, Mr. Davis.
Be happy to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so there's some new terminology that we have all learned this year. We sort of learned some of it last year, that was NTI, which is non-traditional instruction. So that you all know, the only time we actually call it NTI is when the entire district is learning remotely. So if we had to shut one school down because they had a major outbreak, not that they are, but if it were to happen, that would not be called NTI as the state looks at it.
Good point.
Okay, so blended learning groups. In a way to track participation this year, the state worked with Infinite Campus to create what they call blended learning groups. Every one of our students has been assigned in some shape, manner, or form to a blended learning group. At the secondary level, we have the A-Day, B-Day kids. At the elementary, we have the elementary in-person kids. We also have preschool in person so that they can be tracked and their participation can be tracked in Infinite Campus, because attendance is really not, while a student being present in the classroom, yes, their attendance is being tracked that way, but it's technically counted toward participation for the district this year rather than it being true attendance and monitoring a percent of attendance that we normally would function under. So the blended learning groups, we also have a COVID A quarantine, a COVID B quarantine, an elementary in-person quarantine, and should we make any other changes, we would just add those additional blended learning groups. So students flow in and out of those blended learning groups all the time. Participation, again, this year our attendance is based on participation. It is not true participation. So what it is classroom attendance, virtual classroom meetings, or work submission through either electronic means or paper packets. So at any point, and I have a lot of parents that are a little concerned about the way their attendance looks this year, and I keep trying to reassure them that there's really not a whole lot we can do about it at this point. So if you were to look at a student's attendance on their attendance tab in Infinite Campus, you may see lots of red, which is marked unexcused, and that's the code that the state gave us. It's called non-COVID participation. But that might be on, if it's an A-Day, B-Day student, on their virtual day, if they didn't either log in and do something in Google Classroom or submit homework, that teacher doesn't go back and mark them participating unless they had actually did something on that day. The state also pushed out to us the week before last the participation report that will be used to monitor our participation for the year. I've glanced at it once. We're at about 91.6%. It's not where I want to be. I'm going to print it again tomorrow and work with the principals on having the teachers go back and sort of adjust the attendance for their student participation or mark the participation for their students at that point. And all of this rides on the teachers. My attendance clerks cannot manipulate the participation. It has to come from the teachers. Other little notes that we have up there. When a student is COVID positive or quarantined, they are moved into one of those quarantine groups. The nice thing about that is I can set them active that morning or that afternoon, and then I can tell Infinite Campus, okay, they're supposed to come out of that group on this date. And then I don't have to touch that student again unless something changes. So they automatically go in. When I put them in, they go into the quarantine group, and then they will automatically roll out of the quarantine group. But the schools and I, my attendance clerks and office managers talk quite frequently of, oh, well, this kid should be in this group, or this kid should be in, and so we can make those adjustments on the fly as we go along. We're still also making adjustments and assigning new students to their blended learning groups, because every student has to be in a blended learning group for the year. I have done my best with the algorithm and with keeping track of all of that to try and keep our schools as balanced as possible. I am not the most popular person right now because I keep telling parents, no, those numbers
You're
have to stay
actually
balanced.
pretty used to that, aren't you, Mr. Williams?
Yes, ma'am, I actually am.
Sorry
Our
about
department is
your
the,
luck.
no, that's not going to happen department sometimes. But I have tried, and we've tried, and Eric and the superintendent may occasionally get phone calls that, parents will say, well, I talked to so-and-so. I'm sorry, the answer is no. I have to keep those numbers as balanced as possible. We have some schools that are, slightly higher on one side than the other, and that's because of special academic programs that they have. But a lot of the schools, I have them within probably 10 kids between A and B.
So if little Michael Williams gets sent home to quarantine for 2 weeks and he's now in a blended learning group, who is monitoring him and who is he checking in with?
If they're not on VLA, and none of our quarantine kids go on VLA,
Right.
they are actually checking in with their assigned teacher. So if it's the elementary school, they're actually checking in with their regular homeroom teacher.
All right.
Otherwise it's with their whatever 6 classes, teachers that they may have at the secondary level. So they're still assigned to those teachers. When the teachers see their attendance in Infinite Campus, their kids that are in person are at the top, and then all their kids that are virtual are at the bottom. So if it were an A day, all the B kids would be at the bottom virtually. And then any of their quarantine kids would also be in that bottom section that they're participating virtually for the day.
Good explanation. Thank you. Other questions, board members? Mr. Woosley.
So, Mr. Williams, if a student is on a virtual day, so if he's assigned to the A group and on Tuesday is his virtual day, if he's working on a project but not necessarily logged into Google, he'd be counted as non-participating?
He would be counted as non-participating for that day. But when he turns that assignment in, the teachers have a look back now, which they've never had before. Okay. The teacher can then go back in and mark participation for that day.
Okay. Thank you.
Or is there a mechanism for him to sign in on that day when he's working on his project?
We had that, there is the mechanism for that. We had that open very briefly, and it became
I'm way ahead
a
of
little
you.
messy. Let's just put it that way.
Yes.
And so
Room
that was
for
one of those
abuse.
things that we shut down quickly. And I have control of that. I manage that in Infinite Campus for all the schools.
Understood. Other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis. Mr. Williams, welcome back. Mr. Davis.
This is the last slide for you all. And I will update, so this was as of 10/16, which was the Friday before break. So you can see there where our total cases were, elementary, the middle, and the high. And I will let you know that last week, while on fall break, I updated the committee today that we had 9 new cases across 2 at elementary, 4 at middle, 3 at high, and 1 at the district level of a staff member. So you can see that, which is really not a whole lot different than what a typical week would look like. But then you also see the total school-related quarantines. And I wanted to point out a question you might have of why is there more elementary school kiddos that are being quarantined than middle and high. And they are with each other much longer. And so one group of middle or elementary school kids are following with each other along the way. And so the health department has kind of helped us look a little bit at that type of situation But it's just that those kids are with each other for much longer than what middle and high school kids are with, and they're transitioning quite a bit, and they just happen to be also more likely to ride a bus. And the majority of our quarantines have come from the bus. You can't space kids out on the bus a whole lot. So that's where those have come in. But again, just to point out, of all of those that have come, 154, 0 of those kids have ended up being positive. So I put that in the last column because I think that's pretty important to look at.
I do too.
And then the last slide is just for questions.
All these quarantines, like got 101 total elementary, how's that scattered among the schools? Is one area hit more than another, or what have you?
So the cases have been pretty spread out. A lot of our quarantines, of the 9 students we had at the elementary level, the quarantines were pretty consistent. So that's about 12 or so per. Some of them were a little higher based upon if that kid was a bus rider. It's really not about where, it's more about how much contact they had. So the bus being a big one for the elementary kiddos, and then middle and high if they had after school activities, like academics, but it's really not, I can't say that it's been all in one area. They've been pretty spread out.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it is.
So this may be a Mr. Deeves question, but I'm going to ask it now, Mr. Williams. There were some concerns initially, more concerns with bus riding, and we had to tweak our system for bus riders. Can you speak to that just for a second, please?
Sure, I think I can. So initially, the way that we had to, if we were following exactly the way that the state had initially told us to load and unload buses, morning and afternoon would have had kids in different seats, which means they were around different people. So at the beginning, when we first started doing this, the ones that we had more quarantines because those kids were infecting basically twice as many kids because in the morning and in the afternoon.
Not infecting, they were exposing.
Sorry. Cut that out. Sorry. They were exposing, too many words, twice as many kids. So what we did with Mr. Deeves and Mr. Webb is we went back and changed that, and it has made a significant difference.
So that also might account for why we have this 101 at the elementary level.
Correct.
Because a lot of those kids that had to be quarantined were quarantined because of bus riding.
That's correct.
So,
And a lot of our earlier cases had many more quarantines than our later cases had.
yes. Well, you all are doing a yeoman's job there, keeping track of all of this data, and likewise keeping our students and staff safe and healthy, and we greatly appreciate that job you're doing.
If I could throw them.
Superintendent.
Throw some kudos. So obviously, thank everybody that's presented tonight. Thanks Mr. Deeves, who's not presenting tonight. Thanks to Lori. And really all the school personnel, and when I say all, there's too many to actually call out. I mean, from a teacher to a custodian to office managers, I mean, everybody is involved in this, trying to be as safe as we possibly can and to risk mitigation as possible. I cannot say enough for our relationship with our health department. Great collaborative partners have been with us since the onset. I remember our initial meeting when COVID was a new word and not the same bad word that it is now. And with Teresa and Leanne sitting up in our office and talking about what we're going to do, and all this being new to us. And I've been texting with Teresa right now because she had a question for me, and so we stay in constant contact, not only with Lisa, but every day on fall break, they send me the numbers. It's a solid example of district transparency because we started the website and reporting before we were ever asked to do so by the state publicly. And we did that because we wanted to say, we're not trying to hide anything. We think we can do this. We think we can do this to the best of our abilities. We think it's what's best for kids, and we want you to see the numbers, and so we put those out there. The only thing we did not report was quarantines because it's kind of a quirky number every once in a while. And I would just say that communication is key. There's not a single day that goes by that we're not talking to one another about COVID. It's amazing how our lives have shifted to where I know personally, at least an hour to an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours a day is spent just on COVID-related things. And I know those two in particular is a lot of COVID, Michael, then Brent and Lori, we all get involved in this. So it's, for a global pandemic, I'm very proud of the team and the way the team has handled it in trying to make sure that we have kids in as much face-to-face as we can, providing the best service we can, and staying as healthy as we can. So just great job.
Completely agree. And I do want to recognize our Director of Transportation, Mr. Webb, is with us too, and to thank you publicly for adjusting and readjusting how our students ride buses and keeping them safe. Thank you. So great, Ms. Hundley.
I'm sorry, Eric, I don't know if you're prepared to talk about this or
Oh,
not,
boy.
but could you just reiterate the deadline for
Yes,
switching?
absolutely.
And give us, like, what are the numbers looking like
Sure,
right now?
absolutely. So switching to the other big part of my job lately, the Sunday night, which is November 1st at 11:59 is when the cutoff is. So as of about an hour ago, when I sent it out, there were 311 returns at the elementary level and about 200-ish from the high school level. I have seen actually a relatively larger number than I expected of kids going in to VLA at the middle and high school level, especially at junior and senior level. Lots of seniors have decided to go into VLA who have been in person recently. So yes, all those have to be in by Sunday night. I'll actually be sitting up and waiting to click it off. So if I can plead to the public, if they're listening, waiting until the last minute will do no good. It will hurt us in terms of, because it's lessening our time to plan. So if you are sure of what you're doing, please go ahead and make the choice. I monitor those every day, send them out to schools, so they're already working on schedules for kids who are coming back or schedules for kids who are going to VLA. So I just really plead with everybody I know that Sunday night is the deadline, but unless you're struggling with your decision, I would really ask people to go ahead and submit those. It would help us out a lot.
So the ones wanting to come in, is that offsetting a lot of the ones that's wanting to go back?
At the middle and high school level, that's why you see, so like the aggregate change is 311 at the elementary and only like right at about 200 at the middle and high. And I think that's because a lot of kids have decided to go to VLA from middle and high after they've been in school. There's only been a handful of kids at the elementary school level who have chosen to go to VLA if they've already been in person. I think I can speak as a parent. I mean, my kids are smiling I can't see it because they're in a mask, but smiling ear to ear on the way to school. I mean, they are thrilled to be in school. So, and I think that's why we're seeing a good number of kiddos coming out. But it's also something to remember that we've got 1,600 elementary school kids in VLA. Mm-hmm. And so with 311 coming back, I think that says that, there's a lot of people who are really happy. We may not hear from those people, but there's obviously people who are really enjoying it and getting what they need out of it. And so kudos to Dylan and his team because they've done a lot of really great work with that.
Well, and on the subject of seniors moving from in-person to VLA, I have to wonder if that's not related to their peers who are requesting early graduation. More than ever, I feel like we're seeing students who are requesting early graduation, and in VLA, they can just bust through whatever they need to meet the requirements to graduate.
And many are working. That's why I've
Many are
heard
working,
from some
and-
because you can do it whenever you want. And so,
Right.
you're either working or doing whatever and then
Right.
completing their work. So.
Right. Good questions, you guys. Thank you very much. Again, thank you, everybody. Good report, Superintendent. We are ready now for our treasurer's report. Ms. Anderson, come on down.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Oh, this is impossible to do without the podium. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to run a little bit. Should have thought of it earlier.
Hey, keep holding.
All right. I'm going going to try to make this a little bit shorter so I can include some of that information on COVID that you all were asking about.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so our treasurer's report begins on page 10 with the cash. We have a beginning balance of $40,280,000 for the month of September and an ending balance of $35,408,000. So we are seeing the reductions that we expected. The good news is that the county was able to get the bills, the property tax bills, out on time. So our cash flow will not suffer from that standpoint, that they had a delay in that. So in a month, we'll see a cash influx. In the next section, we have our bonded construction funds. And again, no activity in those except for the interest that we're earning on the old Camden money. On the following page, we have the detail by fund of the cash. It ties back to that first page. And on the following page, we have our historical actuals comparison of selected accounts. So our first line, we've got general fund revenue, and you can see that it's pretty steady across each of the 4 years. We are seeing a slight increase this year over last year, and I think that's primarily due to donations. In the salaries and benefits section, we are seeing a steady increase from 18 to 19 to 20, and then 21, we're seeing a very minor decrease. So at this point in the year, that is a good thing. In the next section, we've got the general fund more detailed. For the first two, the general and PSC property taxes, it's really too early for any kind of analysis on that. We've just got little bits trickling through. The next section we've got, or the next line item, we have delinquent property taxes. And those, we have already met the budget. And that was one of the things that I was a little bit worried about, was that we might see more delinquencies during the COVID year. So we'll just have to see how that goes. It is an increase over what I would expect by the end of the year, but so it is still income. On the motor vehicle tax, we're seeing steady increases on that from $800,000 to $900,000 to $1 million, and now $1.1 this year. We are a quarter of the way through the year, so we look pretty close to meeting budget on that one. The utility tax looks a little odd, but it's the timing of when that money came in. The SEEK program, we are a quarter of the way through the year on that, and so we are right on target with that. Again, for the property taxes in the building revenue fund in the next section, it's too early to do any analysis on that. And for both the building fund revenue and the capital outlay fund revenue, we are at 50% of anticipated budget, so we are on target. On the following page, on page 13, we've got detail by every revenue account in the general fund. The following page, on 15, we show the expenses by category. And there are some interesting phenomena with the COVID. We are seeing less things like consulting because people are not wanting to come out. We're seeing reduced costs in registrations and travel because we're not traveling. So it's not huge dollars, but they are some reductions in the costs. There are some areas where the costs just go up and down. As far as property services, we're not sure what's going to be repaired and when, and so those kind of go up and down from account to account and from year to year. So overall, expenses are doing okay. On the following page, the following section on page 23, we have the expenses by function. And after that, on page 26, we have the summary of bonding potential. This has not changed yet. However, the bonds sold on October 14th, and they are scheduled to close on November 4th. So we're going to get savings of about $300,000 on that, and we should anticipate this report changing after that. On the following page, we have the balance sheets for each of the funds. And then on page 40, we have the income statements for each of the funds. And that concludes this portion of the treasurer's report.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Questions or comments? Motion to approve treasurer's report, made by Mr. Dodson, seconded by Mr. Woosley. All those in favor, and that's 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Will you take us through bills and claims, please?
Yes. On page 94, we have our bills and claims. This is the activity primarily in the month of September and October. Since our last board meeting, we've got 1,500 invoices and about $8.8 million in expenses. We are still seeing some expenses come through on the construction, but the dollar amounts have decreased considerably from what we were seeing in the summer months when the kids were out. And that concludes bills and claims.
Wow. Here's my observation about bills and claims. We are keeping Amazon in business in the
Yeah.
school district.
People love Amazon.
Yeah. Any questions or comments? Motion to approve
I got
bills
a
and claims.
question
Mr.
about
Dodson.
Amazon. They've got a thing that, I don't know if we're a member of it, where part of our purchases can go back into money for us. Are we in line with that?
I don't know if we're doing that or not. I can check.
We ought to get that, if we do that much Amazon work, and we as individuals can also pick it for Oldham County Schools, so we want to put it on there.
Sometimes there are catches to those programs.
Well, I know Kentucky's Boys State was on it, and they was getting a lot of money out of it. So it's just worth looking into.
Well, that's
check.
interesting.
We have our PTO signed up for it. It's Amazon Smile is what it's called.
it?
And it's for nonprofits. So I don't know that you could necessarily sign the school system up per se, but you
We're
can.
not officially nonprofit, yeah.
Right,
No.
but you can still, you could select it, if you're buying something at your school and your PTO does it, then you could always go through that and,
Education Foundation is.
Be a nonprofit.
Might be good information
I'll check
to
into
share
that.
with our schools. Everybody orders differently, so. All right, motion to approve bills and claims, please. Made by Ms. Hundley, seconded by Mr. Kehoe. All those in favor? And that's 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Okay, so you guys had requested an update on the COVID funding, and Leslie Robertson is providing you a much more detailed deep dive into all this. So she and I talked this morning.
That was the one that I passed out before the meeting, the multiple page handout.
So I thought I would just kind of skim through that for you all. And I did want to let you know that in addition to the FEMA and CARES, which are the big grants that you are familiar with, we do have some little ones. We have the Last Mile Internet, which we are going to take advantage of to the tune of about $22,000. We do not have enough poverty in the district to use the whole grant, so we are turning back that, and so it'll be available for someone else to use. There's a digital coach grant, digital learning coach, that's about $16,000 that we can use over 2 years, and we have a plan for that as well. And the daycares are getting a second round of funding. This is going to be at the same rate as the first round, so $130 per licensed child. So last time we got $6,000 for PPE equipment and supplies, and we're not getting that, but we haven't used that. So we are very close to finishing up the money in the daycare for salaries, so this will be very welcome for us. So the FEMA update. In case you were not aware, requesting FEMA reimbursement is a long and arduous process that requires a great deal of documentation that must be completed on FEMA forms with FEMA information. And we need to have cleared checks. So one of the issues we've run into on the tech side is we've ordered equipment, but it's not available. So the vendor hasn't cashed the checks, and so we can't request reimbursement on that yet. Complicating this fact is FEMA has not reimbursed for a medical pandemic in the past, and so they don't really have clear guidance about which costs are acceptable for reimbursement. So some of this we are winging it with the help of a FEMA expert who's going to write it up and put it in the language that he believes will shed the right light to show that this was an emergency and a required expenditure. You may recall that FEMA is going to reimburse 75% of an allowable cost, and the state and local folks are supposed to pay the difference. We are assuming that the state, in the end, will not pitch in, and we're going to request the remaining 25% from the CARES grant. That said, we are allowed multiple requests of reimbursement for FEMA throughout the declaration of the pandemic emergency, and there is no cost limit that they have talked about. So Leslie is been preparing the round one with the help from many, many folks, and it is largely complete on our end, and we are going to be asking for the following reimbursements. We're going to be asking in this round about $350,000. At 75%, we'll be at $263,000. So we're going to be asking for food supplies, things like technology related to the food delivery, carts, packaging materials, and some salaries. We've recently found out we can request a reimbursement for the summer food itself. We're also requesting for VLA technology and some of the PPE and health equipment. What we decided to do was to move some of the requests that we had in CARES and move it over to FEMA, because FEMA's saying they're going to reimburse some of that stuff, and then we'll create a new budget for CARES, so that we're hoping to get the best that we can out of both of these programs. In round two, we're going to submit some more food transportation costs and more technology and VLA costs. One of the things that I had mentioned was the technology, that not all the checks have cleared, so we can't actually submit that yet. The other thing that will happen is we're paying for hotspots and other things on a monthly basis, so we want to get an accumulation of costs, and then we'll be able to request again, but we want to get a fair amount of accumulation on that. So we may have other rounds in between that and our final round, but our final round will be for administrative costs. That's the costs of all of us folks doing the accounting for it, all the meetings that Greg had with the principals, and all the other administrators and executives. So that can be reimbursed at a cap of 5% of the total FEMA costs. So we're looking at big-time salaries for a lot of these folks, and so we're hoping to get some reimbursement on that end as well. On the CARES update, we have, as I mentioned, transferred a lot of our planned CARES expenditures into the FEMA program so that we can get reimbursement for that. As a result of that, CARES is largely on hold until we find out exactly what FEMA will pay. So we're requesting this of FEMA, but we do not have strict guidelines that says this will be paid. So we're going to see what happens on that, and then of course we'll be moving 25% of that over to CARES. And then at that point, we will rework the CARES grant budget. So at this point in time, we have been given about $1.4 million in grant money. Leslie's going to give you a slightly different number. She did not include the private, or she did include the private schools, but it is not ours to spend, and they've largely spent it, so I didn't include it. The daycare money is really the largest. It's $465,000 on round one, and we're expecting $400,000 more on round two. And then the ESSER is about $19,000. So there's not a whole lot to look at for those expenses because we're transferring those over to FEMA. But we have largely spent our daycare money. So it will be good to see that coming in. We also have additional expenditures, some of which may be included in what Leslie is presenting in this first FEMA round. We've got in the Fund 1 right now, we've got $416,000, $300,000 of which was spent last month, the last month being September. So that includes the VLA salaries. She's just doing pieces of that at this point. But we are looking at this point, through September, we have spent $377,000. So if we divide that by the 3 pays that we've had, multiply that by the 24 that we owe them, that's going to be $3 million. So we are not going to be in the clear after we finish all these grants.
Say that again one more time, Ms. Anderson.
So far, through the month of September, which is 3 pays, 2 in September, 1 in August, we've paid $377,000 in VLA-related salaries, approximately. We owe these teachers 24 pays. So if we do the math on that, we're looking at $3 million. So we will exceed the grant money that we've been given. So we're trying very hard to use the FEMA money to try to optimize what we can get.
Understood.
So that was the update that I had for you.
Excellent information. Questions for Ms. Anderson on this report? Mr. Woosley?
I do. Ms. Anderson, on the last mile internet technology grant that you said we were going to return some of that money, I know that it's for free and reduced families. Are those because families have requested that, or is it because schools have reported those families?
I do not know the details on that. Trey looked at it in an in-depth process to determine who we could help out with that.
That is in conjunction with our Title I, so that's where Leslie is invaluable on that. So when we do the Title I, it is the parents that request free and reduced lunch. So we know that leans more heavily at the elementary level than it does even at the middle and the high school, just traditionally. For some reason, folks stop applying for that. But our rate is so low is why we could not justify the $54,000 that was originally allocated because it would not have washed when it was all said and done. And so it had to be cut back. So it's not something that we per se generate. It's based on those actual applications that we get through school food service, working with Carlina.
So I guess my question there is, what happens if after Sunday, we have families move into VLA that then need a hotspot? Will we still have money available to offer those?
At that point, we'd look at general fund to offset, as we have, as Stephanie was kind of alluding to, is that we've spent more than what we could possibly get reimbursed because we had to make VLA, to make the year work. And that's one reason why I had to come to you for a tax rate increase. And so if somebody, obviously the ones that are coming back, if they got a hotspot, we'll get that back and we'll redistribute those. But if somebody's out there needing those type of technology things, we would have to go forth and get some more.
Okay. And then out of the 500 so students that have already signed up to come back into school, what will those, we won't need that many teachers in VLA, so will we reassign those back into the classroom? And wouldn't that save some of this money that we're paying into VLA?
No, because those teachers are above and beyond the current staffing plan.
Okay.
And so the other thing that we have to be careful of is that we want to make sure that the VLA experience stays steady throughout. And if we were to shut down classes and combine, and then something happens and we had to do that again, we would literally be putting a student with 3 or 4 different teachers a year. And so we were trying as much consistency. And Dylan and I have had that conversation, is the ideal thing would be if the virus went away second semester, those teachers, and we didn't have any VLA kids at all, those teachers will still be accounted for on payroll, with the exception of some of the out-of-state teachers that have already given us their letter of resignation for when that happens. Those teachers would then become interventionists, extra hands on deck, substitutes or whatever, because we're already having to pay for them anyway. There's no money savings on that at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Good questions, and we appreciate this additional information, Ms. Anderson.
I don't have a much more detailed report for y'all.
This is basically what I was asking for, so I appreciate that.
So if I could, just, even though we've mentioned Leslie, just a shout out to Leslie McKinney, because she lives in minutia, in the weeds on finances. That is her bailiwick. Does a great job with this. Kathy Clements, who is her person that works in between finance and Leslie, and then and Stephanie have done a great job tracking this money, because any federal money, it's like double hard to spend, and you have to track it and have everything in order. So they've done a great job. We will not have to worry about any type of reimbursements or paybacks, because they've done a great job on the front end.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. Board members, moving along, we have one set of minutes to approve, and those are the minutes from the September 28th regular meeting. Any corrections or additions? Motion to approve, please. Made by Mr. Dodson, seconded by Mr. Woosley. All in favor, that's 4 with 1 abstention. Thank you, guys. Superintendent, would you like to share the personnel report, please?
It's slowed down, thank goodness. So it's pretty standard fare for this time of the year. We always send that we have more vacancies and appointments in classified world at this point, but it's pretty standard.
Questions, board members? All right, we are ready for the consent agenda. And we have items A through E. Your recommendation, Superintendent?
Just remember, you do have that one supplemental on the extra contract on D, and with that being said, I would ask that you approve the consent items based on the contents.
Motion to approve the consent agenda, please. Made by Mr. Woolsey, seconded by Ms. Hunley. All those in favor? And that's 5-0. Excellent. Yay, we have some students here for recognitions. These are strange times we find ourselves in, families, but we are so glad that we can recognize these outstanding students this afternoon. Superintendent, I will let you have the honors, sir.
It has been a long time coming. This is about 8 months with us not having students in front of us, so we're pretty excited. So this is how this is going to work. I'm going to stand up here. I'm going to call your name. I'm going to put your certificate on the table. We're not going to touch or anything like that. And then if you'll come over here and stand socially distanced, we'll get a group picture with the ones that are here today so we can make sure it gets in the Oldham era. Okay? All right. And if I butcher your name, I'm out of practice.
You always got some kind of an excuse.
I'm really just not very good at it. All right. The National Merit Scholarship Program has announced 10 seniors in Oldham County Schools have been selected as 2021 National Merit semifinalists, representing all 3 of our high schools. The National Merit Scholarship Program is an academic competition for recognition and scholarships. These semifinalists are among the highest scorers on the 2019 preliminary SAT National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. Approximately 1/3 of the 50,000 high schoolers are notified that they have qualified as semifinalists, so this is an elite group. To be considered for the National Merit Scholarship, semifinalists must advance to finalist standing in the competition by meeting high academic standards and as well as other requirements including leadership, service, and community involvement. Congratulations to these Oldham County students who have achieved semifinalist status. From North Oldham High School, Omar Adam Al-Hamid. I was going to say,
Omar, congratulations.
From North Oldham High School, Molly Conway. Congratulations.
Thank you.
From North Oldham High School, Carter Mitchell. From Oldham County High School, Tyler Bussell. From Oldham County High School, Jenna Gentrude.
Good job.
From South Oldham High School, Christopher Stevens. I'd also like to announce, even though they're not present tonight, Claire Chow from North Oldham High School, Isaiah Terry from North Oldham High School, Benjamin Byerly from South Oldham High School, and Brooke Dardano from South Oldham High School. These are your National Merit semifinalists. Nice job, guys.
Wow.
This is about as close as I ever got to national semifinalists. So I'm not standing here with
Standing beside them,
Standing
yeah,
beside them,
yeah.
Okay. I'm smiling at the myself.
We can tell your eyes.
I'm getting you all in, but still actually tell your people. Thank you. So I might stay a little bit longer to care.
And exercising COVID group photos. Thank you, guys.
Wow. Congratulations, you all. Congratulations, moms and dads. This board knows what it takes to get students to this level or for students to get to this level. So you share in the celebration. So, and thank you all for joining us this evening. We are going to move along with our agenda. If you all will stay with us just for another couple of minutes. We have two superintendent reports. Actually, families, we do have a few more minutes of the meeting. You're welcome to stay with us, or you can slide out if you need to. No worries, okay? We'll go ahead with our superintendent reports. Number one, superintendent.
If you loved him last month, you'll love him again this month. It's Brent Bohannon with the facilities update.
Yay, welcome, Mr. Bohannon.
Notice I said if.
We do.
Included in your packet is the construction report update for October. As you can see there, we have made quite a bit of progress on some of the major construction projects, including Buckner Elementary School. That first floor slab, we hope to have that placed this week if the weather cooperates. We're looking at maybe Wednesday for replacing that slab. And then that addition to that structure should start to go vertical really quick. I remind you all that is an insulated concrete form structure, so it will start to go up pretty quickly. South Oldham High School, the administrative addition is becoming somewhat enclosed. I think all of the ironwork is in place at this juncture. Some of the pictures on this are 2 or 3 weeks old from when we sent them to you, but that project in the back and in the front will have paving done this week, and that should tie up most of the areas outside of the construction fence, and we can start turning some of that back over to the school. Due to the length of this report, I'm just going to let you all ask any questions if you have to. If you have any, feel free to ask, and if not, then I'll move along.
You are correct. It's a long report because we have a lot going on and you have a lot going on, Mr. Bohannon. Let me ask if board members have any specific questions for you.
Okay.
I do have a couple. The roof project for Oldham County High School, is that just about completed?
Yes, the portion above the lower portion on the back side, I think if you look at the index there, that little portion, I think it's area H, is the only part that's lacking done on that. I did hold them up on proceeding with that part because of school starting back up with in-person instruction. So the next large break that they have, they'll come back and take care of that. They are proceeding with the remaining portions of the upper roof area, including the gutters and downspouts, and tying in that. So the upper roof area of the core building is complete.
I also did see $3 million put aside for some upcoming updates to different sports-related facilities.
Yes, well, the part of the consent agenda item was a capital funds request that would kind of envelop a lot of these extracurricular activity and site improvements and things that we've got coming up that we've been discussing over the last couple months, kind of wrapping those all up into one capital funding request from the state to accomplish those.
I was just wondering if you could put in the scope of the soccer field for Oldham County High School. I had heard there was a lot of injuries in the different corners of kids tearing their ACL because of the slope difference. I don't know if that's been fixed or
On the
not.
146 corner?
I'm sorry?
Are you saying the corner?
Yeah.
Like a
in both
146
corners
there
on
at
the parking lot side where it slopes down. If you could maybe look in your scope and see if that could be leveled out a little bit while you're doing new bleachers and fencing.
That might be something we can take care of with a lot of dirt that we have left over from Buckner Elementary School over there.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. And the goalpost for Oldham County High School.
I'm going to defer that to the high school. Last time I spoke with them, Coach Fox and David Latender had a plan for that. They actually, I think they have the goalpost on hand.
Okay.
And they may just be waiting for the end of the season. But I'll check in with them and get back to you on that.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Bohannon, we've had some keen interest in the tennis court project, and I know you compiled some information for me today. Would you just review that for us, please? We're getting
Yes.
close on the
Yes.
repair.
Is there a specific question?
At Oldham County High School. Well, we got the bid in.
Yes, we did. We have a quote to do the repairs that are necessary on that. Pending your all's approval today, we'll go ahead and issue that notice to proceed to Tennis Technologies to do that work. And kind of along the same lines, the repairs that are needed to the baseball fence out there as part of that approval as well on the consent agenda item today. A lot of those things are lumped in that dollar amount. Kind of as Ms. Anderson was talking about earlier today, a lot of expenditures that we have this year that were unforeseen because of the pandemic. We have less money in the general fund to spend on those types of repairs. So we're going to wrap those into kind of a larger construction project and allocate those money to those site improvements that are needed at the 3 high schools at this point.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. Did you have a question, Mr. Woosley? All right. Any other questions for Mr. Bohannon? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You are a busy guy.
He hardly has time for his nap anymore. I don't know what he's going to do.
I know. We are ready for Superintendent Report number 2, sir.
Yes, I'll have Mr. Deeves come up to the podium to talk buses.
Mr. Webb can come join me.
Stay 6 feet apart.
Thank you.
I'm gonna get your bifocals, your magnifying glass.
Nuh-uh. Oh, no, Mr. Deeves. Welcome, Mr. Webb.
Thank you.
All right. So we're here to talk to you a little bit because we didn't really have a working session to talk about buses.
Right.
And the bus fleet and where we're at on that. And on the next section, when you take action, we at least need action on 1 bus purchase due to a settlement with Volkswagen with the state of Kentucky. So we'll walk through that at the end as well. So what you have in front of you is basically the report we have to turn into the state for the status of our bus fleet. And there's a lot of different things that go into this scenario. But if you turn to the last page, we put some notes on there. And Mr. Webb can definitely answer the finer details to it. But some of the handwritten notes and some of the things to figure out the bus transportation costs and what it costs for buses and depreciation values, they take the seat formula and complicate it even more. So if you can figure that out, please come stand up here and give this presentation and we'll work with you. But basically they want us to keep buses as long as we can, and so they give you an increased depreciation value to try to then go back down. Currently we owe no money on buses. This board over the last 5 to 7 years has worked really hard at paying off all our debt for buses. And then in the last 3 years that I know of, have actually bought all the buses outright versus having to finance them. But in current situation, interest rates are really low, and potentially we could need some more buses. And so there's an option to think about financing buses versus outright purchasing them. But I have a hard time doing that sometimes because over the 7 or 10 or 14, 20 years, it's going to cost you a lot more for buses. So we want to just provide as much information on that. So currently we have about 6,000 kids on a normal year would ride our buses. That's 98 regular routes and 14 special need routes for a total of 112 daily buses on the road. With that, though, you need about another 20 to 28 buses to, number one, be on call if one breaks down, and you have to do a rotation of buses for general maintenance. Every single month, a bus has to come in and be serviced 20 days or 30?
A bus has to be serviced every 30 days. Typically, we service between 8, 10, 12 buses a day. So that's, 12 buses that'll be off the road.
So 12 come off, you got to have 12 on, and then you have to have it for mechanical issues or anything else that goes on. So you have to have an increased fleet. With that, though, we do have 170 buses on the lot. But when you start looking at it, there's a reason for that. One is you don't get any money when you have an old bus and try to get rid of it. In my 4 years, we've auctioned off 6 buses, and we end up getting about $12,000 or $13,000 for the buses. So it's almost better to keep some of them for parts and hold on to them for spares and so forth on that piece of it. So if you look right below that big column You see 20-plus years, we have 15 buses over 20 years old. We have 19 between 15 and 19 years. We have 72 between 10 and 14 years. We have 52 between 5 and 9 years old, and then we have 12 that are only 4 years or less in age. Now, with that, there's a bunch of caveats to it that really play into an issue. If you remember a while ago, we talked about the 08 buses. In 08, we bought 18 buses. Of those 18, only 8 are operational. Of those 8, 2 of them have that new engine we paid to put in them when we were going to do 4 to 6, but it became cost prohibitive. So those 8 buses that are on the road could come off the road any given second, just except for hopefully the 2 with the new engines, because basically they were bad lemon buses, and we bought a bunch of them at one time. So you put that into the equation, that's another almost 40 to 45 buses that potentially are older than the 15 to 20 year mark or won't be operational on that piece of it. So that really puts us in a quandary when we want to try to keep 140 buses on the road or on working condition so we can carry out all the routes we need to. I'm on that piece of it.
Wow.
If you start looking in 08 and 2015 at the bottom of that, we stopped buying the 66 passenger buses and started only buying the 78 passenger buses. Why, you ask, is we got less drivers, so the routes are longer, which means we need to carry more kids. But they cost more money as well. We also, in 2013-14, with the decline in number of drivers, we wanted to make sure we kept that going. Currently, we don't owe any money we talked about on that piece of it. So the state recommends we do anywhere between 7 to 9 buses a year based on the size of our fleet to replenish. And we've been doing 6 the last 3 years. And then you can see the years before that above the list. In 16, we only did 3. In 15, we only did 3. We did none in 14. And then you see in 10 and 11, we did 20 and 19. So we're getting to that point of, as we take years off, we're going to be further behind to try to catch back up. But we're still running some buses that are 98s, 99s that are over 20 years old. But we also know we probably can't buy 20 buses at any one time to catch back up. So we wanted to put out there, here's the status of our fleet, here's where we're going, because we don't want to get caught off guard down the road, but we also know it's financially hard times right now on that piece of it. He's got more information about specific years and buses.
So basically, if you look at, we currently have 32 buses that are out of depreciation.
Mr. Webb,
Yes, ma'am.
could you slide over and use
Sorry.
the microphone, please?
So we currently have 32 buses that are out of depreciation. Of those, 29 are the rear engines, which are what we have been purchasing since 2015. Basically, and then of those, only 18 of those are not even roadworthy. We're using those for parts. So as crazy as it sounds, we really need another 5 to 6 rear engine buses so we can get rid of those 32 that are out of depreciation and at least be able to use those as the spare buses for our current big bus fleet. Let's see, so we already said we've got only 8 of our 19s are roadworthy. Basically, the average age of our fleet is 9.96 years, and the average age of the daily bus is 7.5 years old. State of Kentucky does recommend that we purchase 8%, replace 8% of your fleet a year, and they actually recommend that after 14 years you say goodbye to those other buses. Reason they do that is because, every year we've got new technology, they're safer, so they really would prefer every district after 14 years move the buses out of the fleet.
Wow.
So we've got quite a few that are surpass that number.
And we don't want to get rid of buses that don't have a value to them, because that goes into the calculation of what the state says our cost is for transportation, and then they reimburse us back based on that. Even though it's supposed to be 100%, we're at about 48%. give or take. So when you start looking at the depreciation, we go all the way back to 2006, we still have supposedly $7,458 in value before it goes off. And then next year, that'll go off, and you can kind of see how they use those numbers to finagle that SEEK transportation formula.
Well, a lot of information in this report. Questions, board members? Mr. Woosley, hold that thought,
Mr.
Suzanne.
Webb, what was the state recommendation for replacing the fleet a year? What was the
State
percentage?
recommends 8% a year.
8%, okay.
And how many buses is that?
For us right now, it would be somewhere between 7 and 8 buses. You know,
Ready to ask how much a bus costs?
Yes.
I've got that. For a new rear engine, it's approximately $122,465. And for basically the conventional buses, the C2s, those are $99,152.
And that's on your action report, the price of the bus on the next one, too.
Right.
That includes the storage underneath the buses?
Yes, sir.
And pre-wired for the radios?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And
Yep.
cameras?
Cameras we do through a separate vendor,
Okay.
but they are wired. But we either install them or we use another company to put them in.
Suzanne, did you get your question asked and answered?
Yes.
Thank you.
If the board would, maybe Ms. Anderson would like to step up, and although 3 of you are very familiar with the KISTA program, 2 of you are not.
Right.
And explain that to you guys real quick, just so you'll have a little background knowledge. Stephanie, if you want to come up and explain that.
Excellent idea. Thank you, Superintendent.
Stephanie was the actually one that approached me about possibly doing KISTA, which I know the board has, former board members or older board members have a bad taste in your mouth. Mr. McCarr, God bless his soul, told me that he almost got fired over KISTA before he passed. But with the rates so low right now and the state of the economy as it is, it might be wise to look back at it for this year's bus purchases.
Okay,
And that's based on.
okay, okay.
Well, we paid them off and shook them off.
We shook them off.
A few years ago. So what are you here to say to us, Stephanie?
I'm not here to convince you of anything. It's just that we're at some point going to be on the wrong end of having the right number of buses. If we need to replace 7 to 8 per year and we've been doing 6, we're going to be caught off guard at some point. So we need to think of a different plan. This year, we're not buying any buses except for the VW one.
So as the superintendent requested, can you share any other information about what KISTA is and how that translates for
It's a
this?
state financing program where they pull together a whole bunch of people to try to get better prices on things. The interest rates now are low. I mean, I don't like financing either. But if we've got ourselves in a bind, we don't have the cash, it might be an opportunity for us to look at. They ran some estimated costs on this for us. It will cost an additional $11,000 because of interest on this. They are going to cover some portion of our insurance. And I don't know what that dollar amount is, but we don't have to pay for both liability and collision. They will pick up one of those.
When you say they,
The KISTA program.
the KISTA program will.
Is the $11,000 on a total of 8 buses or per bus?
That's on one.
One bus. It's financed over 10 years. We can pay it off at any time. And so if we pay it off, it's not like the bonds where you're stuck with them and you pay the interest until you get to the point that you can refund those. This is a different program, and if we get to a point where we can pay these off, if that's the direction we decide to go, then we can do that, and we won't be spending the money over, we won't be paying for interest over 10 years.
My personal opinion, I know there's another report, paying interest to me is ridiculous, because we were paying $325,000 a year interest on buses until I started pushing to get it paid off, and we all did. And I times 8 to 122, we're looking at $1 million buying 8 buses. And personally, I'd say get 8, but straight out of contingency.
Well, we will have to take action when that recommendation comes to us about the purchase of new buses. But let me ask for now if there are other questions or comments about Stephanie's information on KISTA. Woosley, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm not saying we got to do 1 or 8 or 20.
Right.
We don't want to get ourselves in trouble.
Right.
But at some point, we will be in trouble because we can't transport the kids.
Is that 11,000 over the whole period or per year per bus?
It's the whole 10 years. So if you get this paid off in 3 years, then you're not going to pay the full $11,000.
So, simple math, I mean, it's about $80,000 for 8 buses over 10 years, correct? That was my simple math. That's why it may make some sense for this year if we decide, because we're taking such a hit on COVID, to do it for a 1 year. That's just $80,000, which doesn't even buy you 1 bus. And then as soon as things hopefully start shaking up again, possibly pay that off early. And basically you're borrowing their money without putting us in a tight spot, because once you spend that money, it's not liquid anymore, would be my concern.
Right.
I mean, we know that we're not going to follow the same model we're doing this year. For one, I don't think the need will be there for the virtual academy as it is this year, which has been a pretty heavy expense. But it's not like the economy, I don't think, is going to turn around overnight and be just as good as it once was. And that contingency is for emergencies. Just looking at the roofs that we've had to do over the last 2 years, those weren't planned for. Oldham County roofs in particular, that wasn't in the design. I don't like, I have no credit balance myself, but there becomes a time when that rate's so low, it may be something you want to think about. You don't have to do it tonight. We want to kind of post that idea in your head. We may need to do a special call to run the numbers, walk you through that again.
Yes.
And then make a decision at that point. There's really only one thing when it comes time to action tonight, and that's a time crunch, is the VW settlement, because that's got a pretty soon deadline date on that. But wanted to float that idea past you guys versus in a weekly news submission at a board meeting where you could ask those questions and kind of get everybody on the same page.
Correct. We don't have to make any decision tonight. The offer on the table from KISTA would be that it would cost us $11,000 per bus
In interest.
in interest.
And then they would pick up some portion of insurance, but I don't know that dollar amount.
Can you
Okay.
follow back up with that to tell us what that offset's going to be on the insurance?
Yes.
All right, so we will wait till we have further discussion on the purchase of new buses and how to do that. We have been diligent about replacing buses as we needed to with the transportation department, so we understand the importance of doing that, I think.
What is our contingency right now?
You know, I don't know offhand.
I was going to say, when you take VLA, and this is round numbers, and a lot of it depends on what FEMA comes in at, and if there's another CARES stimulus package, some things we just don't know. I think when it's all said and done, we're probably going to be about 11 million.
I think we were at 15, and if we take out this 3, then yes. It's really a very difficult year to predict because we don't know what's going to happen with VLA. We don't know when it's going to stop. We are seeing some savings on the side of travel and training. But then that again puts us at a disadvantage for later years. So to pull it straight out of contingency might put us at risk a little bit for some roofing project that comes up.
You have a question? Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Woosley?
Ms. Anderson, is there a deadline on when you can apply for KISTA?
No, they recommend, I think, by November 15th, so that you can get your bus in time in spring so that it's ready for the next year. But he did say we could do it.
That was my next question, is what kind of delay are we looking at? If we order a bus today, when is it delivered?
Honestly, I would say that with
within a week or two.
the other there's so many districts that aren't ordering the normal number of buses. I would think that even if we put in a later order, we typically have ours here by March or April. We just choose not to put them on the road until the following year or following school year. So I would think that even if we were a little bit late putting in an order, we should still have them in time for the start of the next school year.
KISTA said November 15th, they want to guarantee it for next school year. We have up through the middle of December if we want to get on the KISTA plan. And that's why when you see your action items, we talk about it. We're giving you 3 scenarios. We just need action on one of the 3. pieces, but we wanted to, like Greg said, we wanted to put it in front of you all so we could start thinking about it.
Right,
Well,
right.
the
And
Volkswagen grant is going to allow a bunch of school districts to be able to order at least one bus.
Yes.
So there's going to be a high number ordered this year,
Yeah.
I would think.
Well, we were hoping, what, was it 7 or 8 was the original number?
I'm talking about statewide.
Yeah,
We're
that's
looking
what, yeah, that's what we'll talk about in the action piece of what that looks like for us compared to the
Well,
state.
what Kevin is saying is that because of Volkswagen, there's going to be some districts that normally wouldn't order a bus. Because here's the thing that I want to be very transparent with you guys. A lot of these counties are not replacing 8% of their buses every year. They just can't afford to. It's too expensive. I mean, we've been really good, at least I can say from the time I've been here, of doing 6 for the most part every year. 3, it's been typically 3 out of general, 3 out of contingency. This last year, we did all out of contingency because we didn't want, not this year, last year, didn't want to do a tax rate
tax increase.
So we've been very good about that. But I will guarantee you, because talking to other superintendents, they can't afford to replace 8%. So I definitely would probably want to do 6 if we decide to do something total. 1 possibly being the Volkswagen if you vote on that tonight, and then 5 others, and then get us on that schedule where we may have to go up to 8 one year or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of moving factors on this, but I didn't want you all to have to think about doing that tonight without at least getting some of this information and thinking about it.
Can we approve tonight if we decide to do 5 with KISTA and then when they come in, pay it off? I mean, is it going to cost us anything at that point?
But we don't need to do that tonight, Mr.
Well, he has a November
Woosley.
15th deadline.
Only for if I want to guarantee it for, and that's usually by getting it by March.
Right.
You want to guarantee, it's crazy. It's when you get them, it's when you put them into service is when they start counting their 14 years. And so if you get it and you put it in service too early, you lose almost a whole year of service on it. So you try to get it to where you get it right at the end of the school year, you get it licensed in June and July, so you get another year.
And then the clock starts ticking.
Yeah,
And
it's-
if I might, I'd like to table any further discussion on this because we are going to need to set a special called meeting. We'll have to set an instructional meeting / special called meeting, and we can take care of this within the next few weeks.
Table it all because they're asking for approval on the Volkswagen.
Not right now, they're not. This
No,
is the
tonight,
superintendent report.
Tonight, if you look at the recommendation, it's a 1, 2, 3. We're going to take that, if we can, by 1, then by 2, then by 3. 1 would be, when we get to that point,
When we get to the action item,
Yes.
Kevin.
Yeah, we're coming back up.
They're coming back up, this happy crew. All right, this was a really good superintendent report. Thank you for tagging on, Ms. Anderson. Let's move along then, guys, to action item F, superintendent.
give me 1 second. There
It's
we
a
go.
student hardship.
Yep. Consider approval of student request for early graduation. JC is a 17-year-old senior at South Oldham High School.
Yes, were there any questions, board members? So your recommendation, sir?
Approve the early graduation request.
Motion to approve, please, made by Mr. Dodson, seconded by Ms. Hundley. All those in favor, and that's 5-0. Action item G, please.
If you liked them the first time, you'll love them the
Here
second
we
time.
go
Here they come
again.
again. Actually, it's just Mr. Deeves coming, I guess.
Mr. Webb's coming too, I think.
Now we get down to the action item on this.
So the action items, we do need to purchase buses, but we definitely need to purchase 1 bus. Because there's a statewide settlement, there's actually a national settlement, and the state got a certain amount of money through the Volkswagen emissions issue. Each district was given the opportunity to go anywhere from 1 to, we thought, 7 or 8 buses to get them at half price. After going through all the minutia and the fine details, Oldham County is only eligible for 1 bus purchase out of the Volkswagen settlement with the state of Kentucky. The hard part is it makes you take a bus that is roadworthy and make that bus non-roadworthy. And so you really don't gain anything on your, for us, we don't gain anything on our overall number of buses on the road. We basically just get a newer bus to replace a bus on that piece of it. And what they make you do to get rid of that bus is you have to drill a 5-inch core out of the middle of the engine to guarantee you won't use it anymore.
And it cannot be one of the
Oh.
08s.
And it can't be an 08 or a 98 bus. It's got to be one that's on the road that we used last year as a regular route. Then that's where we thought we were going to be able to get 2 or 3, but we weren't using some of the buses, so we can't do that. So basically, what we do is we purchase one bus at full price, and then they will reimburse us up to 50%, depending on what the rest of the state does. So that number could still fluctuate a little bit on what the final number is, but they said we should feel pretty certain on one bus and getting 50%. So I think it's crazy if we don't at least purchase one bus and try to get it at 50% cost using either general or contingency fund money on that piece of it. So that's our recommendation, at least, is to do number one at the bottom of this, is to purchase the one bus that meets the requirements for the Volkswagen settlement. And then 2 and 3, I think we need to think about asking you guys to table that until we can get more information on, do you want to buy 5 additional buses using KISTA financial money, or do you want to buy 1 to 5 buses using contingency or general fund money?
Yeah,
I got one question on that. A while ago, y'all said we need 8 a year, 8 to 9 a year. Going from 5 to 8 buses would only be $267,000 to go to 8 buses.
Not if you buy the big
No.
ones, it'd be 360,000.
Well,
they're 120
I know,
roughly apiece.
it's gonna cost $979 for 20 for 8 buses and $612 for 5 buses.
I can't do math that quick, but I'm not
Nevertheless,
arguing either
He
way.
was a social studies teacher, let me remind you. A good one, but
nevertheless, Mr. Dodson, we, as Mr. Deves suggested, we are going to hold on making this decision right now on how to purchase the next 1 to 5 buses.
And we can go up to 7 or 8. We're just talking about knowing what the budget was and what we thought we could at the time, at least following the trend of the 6 a year we've done the last 3 years since Mr. Webb and I have been asking for it.
Yeah. Mr. Woosley,
Why would we spend $60,000 to take a bus that we used last year off the road just to replace it with a new bus?
Because it's at least an older bus, and you'll get that many years back from it.
The
on that
bus
piece
that
of-
would be coming
I'm
off the
struggling with
road
that
is
too.
19 years old.
It's still an old bus,
Say
but
that
it's
again. I'm
roadworthy.
sorry.
it's
It's
19.
19 years old.
The bus that you're going to take off the road?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay.
So, and that's what bit us, and it's actually biting many of the other districts that are trying to get these buses, is they put in that stipulation that not only did it have to be 2001 and older, it also had to be a daily use bus. We just got lucky and we had, I mean, whether or not it's lucky, we had an old bus on the road. And that, from what I'm talking to other school districts, the same things happened to them. You know, they were hoping to be able to get more buses, but, you know, kind of like us, they use them for their spare buses, so they're not on the road on a daily basis.
Well, so we would be taking that bus off the road anyway,
in a couple of
In a
years.
couple of years.
sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
ideally, that bus would fall in, you know, when I was talking earlier about, you know, if we were able to purchase that 5 or 6 buses, we could literally take 32 buses out of our fleet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether or not we auction, or put them up on the auction, or send them out for scrap, you know, so we could reduce, you know, number one, you're taking insurance off of them. Number two, we're not, you know, we don't have to maintain them anymore. So, you know, 6 buses gains us, or clears 32 off of our.
Right. So Superintendent, do you want to revise your recommendation to us on this action item, sir?
Well, I'm going to recommend that we look at number 1 and go ahead and do the one through the Volkswagen settlement, but then we table action on number 2 and number 3 are kind of the same, it's just different ways of paying for that. And then have a special called board meeting in about 2 weeks, and we can run the numbers, find out what the actual, what the insurance break is going to be. If we were able to get rid of the 30-something buses that we just talked about, what that would do with our insurance, so we can kind of get a ballpark feel for what the actual money is going to look like. And then, as Kevin suggested, or Larry, I forget whoever it was, there's nothing that says we have to wait the 10 years to pay that off. If pastures become green again, pay it off in 2 years and you save that interest. It's just a way to get the buses that we feel like we need without bankrupting contingency, just in case things don't get much better.
Now, on this vote with just the.
This is just the one, the
Just the
Volkswagen.
one, that's no financing on that one, we're just gonna
It's just
take-
going to buy that one. It'll either be out of contingency, depending on where Stephanie, squirrels, has to shake the piggy bank, either be out of contingency or just general fund, and hopefully get the 50%
And then we
reimbursement.
have to do all our stuff, and we have to send pictures and VINs and cores and all that stuff to get the one bus before we get the reimbursement.
Wow.
But we have to do the upfront cost on it.
All right. All right, so I think we're at a point where we can move along on this action item. So your recommendation again, sir?
Approve, number one, the purchase of one bus that meets the requirements set forth by the Volkswagen settlement with the state of Kentucky, knowing that we will purchase the bus and then submit the needed paperwork for reimbursement, along with a core with a big hole, but also knowing that the reimbursement, my screen is going down, knowing that the reimbursement is not guaranteed at this time.
All right, so may I have a motion to approve, please? Made by Ms. Hunley, seconded by Mr. Dodson. All those in favor? And that's 5-0. Thank you both.
Thank you.
We are ready for public expression. I don't see our friend, Mr. Williams.
Do you have any friends?
Also don't see any public.
And I don't see any public either. We're good. We're good. We're going to move along. Please review your two information items in the agenda, one of which is the monthly preschool report, and the other is the monthly district energy report, district energy usage. So at this time, we need to go into executive session pursuant to KRS 61.8101C to discuss two litigation matters pertaining to student injuries, one litigation matter pertaining to a non-student injury, and one special education matter. The board needs to go into executive session pursuant to this KRS to discuss litigation preparation, the public disclosure of which might jeopardize the board's position. Motion to go into executive session, please. Made by Mr. Kehoe, seconded by Mr. Dodson. All those in favor? And that's 5-0. Thank you, everybody.